So this is a model that I made, and what I want to do is UV unwrap this. So first we want to go into the shadings tab on the top. Then we want to add a new material, and we also want to add an image texture node. And we also want to put the color into the base color from the image node. Now for the texture dimensions, I like to use 2048 by 2048. I also use 1024 by 1024 for smaller models. Ideally, the dimensions of your texture should be in the square powers of 2. This is mainly for optimization purposes, and it has something to do with how our computers are built with a binary system. Now I like to select the generated type into color grid, but you can also select UV grid. We want to use a grid instead of a blank image because we want to be able to see our mapping errors. We can already see errors here because we have not UV unwrapped this mesh properly yet. So I want all my meshes to be on the same texture map. So to do that, we want to hit A, which selects all the objects that we want to be on the same texture map. Then while pressing shift, we want to select the object that already has our texture. Then we want to hit Command-L and we want to select link materials. Now our mesh is ready for the next stage of the UV unwrapping process. We can now go into the UV editing tab on the top. The next step is marking seams. So to do that, we tab into edit mode. And we want to also be in the edge select mode, so you can do that by clicking on the edge select in the top right. So to mark seams, we want to select an edge and we want to right click and click on mark seams. I like to mark seams where there are edges or material separation or even color separation. So what I mean by that is that the faces I selected over here, I want it to be a different material and color than the faces I selected over here. That's why, as you can see here, we have a seam separating the two parts of the mesh. With cylinders, you should also add a seam on one of the sides of the cylinder curve. For this, I like to add the seam where it is in the most hidden spot from the player view, especially if this is for a video game asset. Now, after we finish marking all the seams for the mesh, we want to select all the faces in edit mode by pressing A. And then we want to press U and select Unwrap Minimum Stretch. You are also free to experiment with Unwrap Conformo or Unwrap Angle Base. Now, if you look at the bottom middle of the screen, we have the Unwrap menu. Now, I like to keep my margin at around 0.2, and what margins are is basically how spaced out your UV islands are from each other. Now, I like to move the islands I've just unwrapped to the side, and this is to make space for the other meshes that I want to unwrap. So the next step is to do the same thing over and over again with the other meshes or objects that you want to unwrap. So basically, you're going to mark seams. After you finish marking seams, you're going to select all the faces again and press U to unwrap, and do that over and over again for each mesh. So after we finish doing that process, we want to fit all our UV islands into the box. And I like to keep my UV islands around 1 square block apart. And that's why the color grid is pretty useful. And this is because we do not want any bleeding issues. And what texture bleeding issues are when your texture has an overlap. And so we have faces that are not supposed to be colored one way, but because there are overlap in the UV map, it may be colored the way you don't want to be colored. But the main thing you want to use the color grid for is so that all the texture quality of your whole mesh is relatively the same. As you can see here, I'm scaling down this UV island in order to have the squares be relatively the same size as the texture above, or the squares above. And we want this to be the case so that we don't have parts of our texture where one face is of lower quality or higher quality than the rest of the faces in the mesh. Now the UV unwrap for this is almost done. There's just this one issue sometimes when working with spheres or cylinders, where sometimes the texture is weirdly stretched out. Now there's a trick to fix this, and to do that we have to select one of the faces and we press U again, and we want to select light map pack. After that, we select the faces where there is the shading error, which is the cylinder, and we press U again, and we press follow active quads. Now after moving the texture around and scaling it down, we have our final result. For my next video, I'm going to be showing how I texture paint. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below if you found this video helpful.